Good afternoon, welcome back to Football League World TV. It's time for another edition of the EFL London show. I'm your host, George Dagless, and joining me this afternoon, Marcus Ally. Marcus, how are we?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Always a day that I look forward to, I think, in the Football League calendar, the FA Cup first round. Not some teams that we don't cover on Football League World, but some teams you get to learn some stuff about and always some really intriguing storylines looking ahead to this weekend.
Yeah, we're certainly going to get into the first round. At first, I thought you were going to say it's the EFL London show that you look forward to every Thursday, but you threw me a curveball there and mentioned the first round instead. Probably a little bit more momentous, but there we are. People at home, wherever you're watching, do get in touch concerning the London clubs, the clubs you support. Let us know how you feel you're getting on. Looking back at obviously the week's results with some of the clubs and looking ahead to the FA Cup as well this weekend, as Marcus mentioned. Let's get straight into the action then and talk Fulham first of all. And in case you missed it somehow, Fulham beat Blackburn Rovers 7-0 at Ewood Park. Admittedly, Rovers were down to 10 men fairly early on, but that was still an impressive result from the men from Craven Cottage. Now 2 points just behind Bournemouth in the promotion race at the top of the Championship table. Marcus, let's just look at it in general terms. At first, it's a very clinical performance, wasn't it, from the Cottagers?
Absolutely, yes. To score 7 goals, I think it was just over 2.5 expected goals is pretty ruthless stuff. I think we all know that Fulham probably had a performance like this in them at some point in the season. It turns out Blackburn were the unfortunate party that ended up being on the receiving end of it. Obviously, didn't help themselves with JP Van Hecker's sending off. But overall, still a great performance. Mitra only scoring one of the goals as well. I think you might have thought before sort of looking at the scorers, seeing that Fulham had won 7-0, that Mitro could be bagging a hat-trick or even more. But no, it was an all-round performance. They shared the goals out a little bit. Naskins Cabano getting a brace and an assist. I think he's one of the unsung heroes of this Fulham squad. Was loaned out in the second half of last season to Middlesbrough, deemed not good enough for Fulham's Premier League survival efforts, but has really come into his own under Marco Silva back, a trusted and valued member of the squad. And I think he was a real key player in some of their more narrow victories so far this season, but maybe hasn't got the credit, and he really shone at Ewood Park. So yeah, very, very sort of intimidating performance and scoreline for Fulham.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at their form since the last international break in October, and it just shows you how much the Coventry result before then just must have hurt them. Obviously lost 4-1 before the international break at the CBS Arena. Coming out of it, beat QPR in the West London derby 4-1, beat Cardiff 2-0, went to Nottingham Forest and won 4-0, beat West Brom 3-0. Now they've scored 7 against Blackburn without conceding. So just one goal conceded in the last 5 games since the international break, and plenty going in the other way. What do you think seems to have clicked, Marcus? Because it's not as if Fulham were struggling before the last international break, but you know, as we've mentioned, they let in a few odd results. Obviously, the heavy defeat away at Coventry, but now they've really got the bit between their teeth at the moment.
Yeah, I think variance has a part to play. A lot of the results that Fulham were falling on the wrong side of before the last international break, maybe with the exception of that Coventry game, they were creating loads of chances, having so many shots, and I think there was one point where they scored 2 goals from 30 shots. So it was obviously going to turn around at some point. I think Marek Rodak coming in between the sticks for Paulo Gazzaniga has made quite a good difference. He was there before when Fulham achieved promotion under Scott Parker and been more of a calming influence on the Fulham back line. So small tweaks from Marco Silva, but it's definitely made a huge difference. But I'm not sure too many people were really too concerned about Fulham falling away from the automatic promotion places altogether. I did think that this was bound to happen, and obviously that heavy defeat at Coventry turned out to be the catalyst for them to really sort themselves out.
Yeah, they're really motoring on. They'll be a little bit gutted that there's another international break around the corner later on this month, but certainly looking good for them. That's a 7-0 win they've recorded at Ewood Park. Let's talk about their West London neighbours now, Queen's Park Rangers. QPR got back to winning ways in the Championship away at Cardiff last night. Andre Gray was the man on the score sheet in the first half. Marcus, this could have been perhaps a slight banana skin. Obviously, Cardiff are struggling at the moment, but they showed a bit of fighting spirit at the weekend, getting a 3-3 draw at Stoke. So, it was their first home game after Mick McCarthy's sacking. It was a good opportunity for Cardiff to try and, make a little bit of a statement and show a bit more resilience. But, QPR did the job, and Andre Gray got himself in the score sheet.
Yeah, it's a real luxury to have an experienced goal scorer with the record that Gray's got at championship level, who's not even the man that you're pinning your hopes on to really lead the sort of playoff charge at the Kind Prince Foundation Stadium at the moment. Over 46 games, the examination of the squad is going to be to a large extent, and having Gray to come in for Lyndon Dykes, who's been firing so much this season, is a real string to the bow of Mark Warburton. And I think Cardiff played pretty well in this game. We're unlucky not to get on the score sheet. Ryan Giles, back in his more familiar left wing back position, is performing pretty well. And so, yeah, QPR will be very happy to get the 1-0 win. The 3-3 draw at Stoke for Cardiff would have built a lot of momentum. They would have been optimistic going into the match. And QPR obviously a little bit sore after conceding that late Jack Colback goal to stop them winning on Friday evening. So a real confidence boosting win, morale boosting win for Mark Warburton's men. And of course, they'll have their eyes on the top six after every game, I think, in the stretch that's coming up. So to get the win, Andre Gray getting on the score sheet, it was a great pass, disguised pass from Andre Dizel to send him through as well. It just shows the strength in depth that QPR have and how that should stand them in good stead looking to compete in and around the top 6 places moving forward.
Obviously, we've not seen much of Gray from the start, at least for QPR so far this season. All he can do is score goals when he does get the opportunity, and that's what he did last night. Do you think we'll see more of him in the coming weeks? Do you think we should see more of him, or perhaps he has still got to sort of remain happy being lower down the pecking order behind Charlie Austin and Lyndon Dykes?
Yeah, I think it depends on the opposition that Rangers have, because there's been some matches where Wolverton likes to play 2 more attacking midfielders behind one central striker, or just 1 and 2 up top. We have seen Chris Willock move to left wing back at times this season. Sam McCallum is now injured again. So if that happens, then that leaves one spot free in the front 3 for possibly Andre Gray to get a bit more involvement. You can't really argue with Lyndon Dykes' form at the start of the season, and he's really justified his spot as the main number 9 at QPR. So it'll be interesting to see. I think maybe when we've got these Saturday, Tuesday or Wednesday midweek fixtures, Andre Gray could have more of a part to play. But no, it's healthy competition at the end of the day, and I'm sure he's passing on his experience in the dressing room as QPR look to really achieve a higher league position than they have in certainly the last few years this term.
Yeah, and just before we move away from QPR, I just wanted to touch on them defensively as well. I think it's fair to say, since the international break, they have improved. I mean, well, after the Fulham game, which was the first one back where they conceded 4, and I think there was starting to be a few calls, maybe suggesting that Mark Warburton needed to move away from that back 3 or with back 3 with the wing backs that was so successful towards the end of last season, because they were shipping a lot of goals. But you look at the results since. Yes, they conceded 2 at Peterborough. But other than the other 4 games, just the 1 goal, and including the League Cup game against Sunderland, obviously they went out on penalties. But in the full 90, didn't concede a goal there. Didn't concede at home to Blackburn. Only conceded 1 at home to Forest, and that was very late on. And obviously kept another clean sheet last night. It looks like they're gradually getting back that defensive resilience that they had for so much of the second half of last year, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a dangerous sort of cocktail if they can sort it out at the back, because we know how good they are at the top of the pitch. I don't think that criticism really was that justified. It's so to do with the system, with the 3 centre-backs, with the ability for Rob Dickie and Johan Barbe to get forward and combine with their wing-backs that has made QPR so successful and is the reason why they have such a lofty league position at the start of this season. So I feel like you have to kind of accept that you might concede a little bit more than other teams around you when you're playing that type of brand of attacking football. But no, it's been really good to see. I think in Seny Dieng, they've definitely got one of the best goalkeepers in the division. And despite Barbe and Rob Dickie maybe taking the headlines for more of what they've done in possession so far this season, they definitely are defenders that when you need them to sit back behind the lead, they are capable of doing that. So it's been really positive since that last international break, and maybe that could be what makes the difference between them maybe just missing out and finishing inside the top 6 this season.
Okay, we will see how they got on this weekend. We'll talk about it in a bit. They're off to Blackpool. They're currently 5th, though, QPR in the Championship table. Let's move to Millwall next. And we should probably mention that not so long ago, as so many people we were calling Millwall the draw specialists in the Championship. But we should mention they haven't actually drawn a game since the end of September. So it's getting a little bit more unpredictable now for the Lions, and in many ways it's been positive since that last draw at Nottingham Forest. Three wins in their last 4 games in particular, Marcus, makes for pleasant reading. They've not scored as many goals as they would have liked, but they're still starting to get wins on the board. And the goal against Reading to give them a 1-0 victory early this week was quite a well worked one, wasn't it? A nice bit of link up play down the right, and Benicophobe got himself into space and tapped home. And I think for Lions fans, that's the start of what they want to see more of this season.
Absolutely, yeah. Good for Benicophobe to get the goal. It hasn't quite exceeded or even met our expectations after he joined in the summer, of course, on loan. So it's going to be interesting to see how he sort of builds on that confidence. I think Millwall looking really good. Just 1 point off the playoffs, when a few weeks ago we were talking about fans calling for Gary Rowett to leave the club. So it's very confusing that those remarks at this stage. Jed Wallace was pulling the strings, as he always seems to do in this matchup once again. And Reading, despite being on poor form, have had some really good results this season. They won at Fulham. Ovie Ejaria and John Swift are going to cause problems for any championship back line this season. So the fact that Mill were able to keep the clean sheet and then nick it through a Phobe late on is a huge positive, and one that they'll be taking into the weekend. They're definitely looking up at the moment, and avoiding the draws, still fine margins. So that suggests there might be a couple of draws around the corner, not usually winning matches by more than 1 goal, but plenty of positives at the Den, and they have the right to fancy their chances of being right up there come the end of the season.
I think naturally when a team gets a late goal like that, and they were obviously pushing for it, and they opened up a little bit more in the second half, there's naturally calls for them to be a bit more like that from the start. Do you think Gary Rowett will look to implement that strategy a bit more in the games ahead? Or, I mean, he's always a manager that likes to try and find a balance, isn't he, sort of between attack and defence. Do you think he might be persuaded by what he saw in sort of the last half an hour early this week, that perhaps it's time to go a little bit more gung-ho with those Millwall players he's got available to him?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think he's more stubborn. I think he likes to get a foothold in the game in the first half an hour, maybe first half, before he starts thinking about how he can go on and win it. He trusts in his players that if he can provide that solid foundation with the likes of Cooper and Hutchinson and Wallace in defence, that Jed Wallace and Mason Bennett, who we saw, made an impact, and hopefully Benicophobe, if he can find his shooting boots a little bit more, can go on and build on that if they do have a decent footing in the match. I'm not sure. I think it's worked to this point. I don't see why he'd change it when they're just 1 point off the playoffs, when that's kind of what's put them into this position. So no, I don't think Rowett's going to change it up just yet.
Okay, we will see how that approach comes along in the next few weeks. And one final result to talk about before we move ahead, looking ahead to the weekend. Obviously, no games for Wimbledon, Leyton Orient or Sutton in midweek, but there was for Charlton, and we're going to talk about them now. Marcus, your team remains unbeaten under Johnny Jackson in this second caretaker period he's had in charge. And obviously, he was unbeaten in that one game he had last season against Bristol Rovers. A 1-1 draw earlier this week against Rotherham United. Rotherham boss Paul Warne said that at the end of the season it could turn out to be a very good point for his Millers team, given that he expects Charlton to be higher than they are currently in the League One table. I think that's a compliment in itself, isn't it, for the Addicts and how they're looking now under Johnny Jackson. Yeah,
extremely high praise from Paul Warne. He's a very respected manager at this level for good reason, taking Rotherham up from League One on 2 separate occasions and looking like he's going to come at least close to doing so once again. Johnny Jackson's picked up 7 points in 3 games in caretaker charge after Nigel Adkins picked up 9 in 13. So he's nearly overtaken the points that Charlton had before he took the reins, only in a 3-game stretch, which has included Sunderland away and Rotherham at home. So it's extremely positive signs. It was a really good game, this. Michael Hikwe was very fortunate to stay on the pitch. I think there was a debatable second yellow card, which the foul that he didn't get given a yellow card for when he was already booked was probably worse than the one that he had got the yellow in the first place for. So I think Charlton could feel a little bit aggrieved on that. The scoreline was 1-0 to the Millers at the time, so no idea how it would have panned out if that did happen. But Paul Warne substituted a Hikwe then a couple of minutes after, which sort of said everything that you need to know about what the general feeling about that decision was. But it was an excellent game. Craig McGillivray made an excellent save at 1-0 down from a Freddie Ladapo header, that then Charlton went on and really sort of built on that, and the fighting spirit was there. There was a decent atmosphere created by the fans. under the lights and really sucking the ball towards the covered end in that second half. Huge performances also at the back from Jason Pearce and Akin Famewo. That Rotherham asked so many questions of you aerially and how you can defend your own 6-yard box, and they really stood up to the challenge, and one that they probably wouldn't have been able to, judging by the amount of endeavour that it appeared was being put in under Nigel Adkins. So probably the best result of the three for me and performance under Johnny Jackson so far.
Yeah, I think what's good as well with Charlton is you're just kind of starting to see the real Charlton that you would have expected at the start of this season, where they've obviously competed with two teams that they should be competing with up near the top of the table, beating Sunderland, drawing Rotherham, and as well as that, they've obviously put a team away in Doncaster that are struggling near the bottom, and Charlton should be doing that. Teams that are down near the bottom of the table. Admittedly, you could say that Doncaster should be higher up than they are, but it looks like Charlton are sort of getting the results, doesn't it, that they should be getting now at this point with that squad.
Absolutely. It's going to be a race against time, really. It's a shame now that really Adkins was given so much longer. Even if Jackson had 3 or 4 more games, you'd think that could make a really big difference. Charlton are 11 points off the playoffs now, which I've only started looking at really in the last few weeks. But if Jackson had more time, obviously Charlton, I think, picked up just 1 win and 3 losses before in the final 4 games of Adkins' reign. Maybe if there was Jackson in charge, then they could have got a better points return. So I've always said that it was a top 6 squad since the end of the January transfer window. But I think at this stage, given the ground that we've got to make up, a mid-table finish would have to be called satisfactory. There's a tricky run coming up, some winnable games, some not so winnable games. They play Plymouth on the 20th of November. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on, how it develops, what players are Jackson's favourites, what ones aren't. But it's going to be really interesting. But I do think the odds are stacked against them to really make a top 6 push when we've already had a third of the season gone and they're only 1 point above the relegation zone.
I mean, one more bit of positive news, Marcus, just before we come on and just before we leave Charlton as well. Deji Elarewe signed a new contract. Obviously, a really promising young player, the latest in the long line of Charlton academy products. There were some big sides reportedly sniffing around him, looking to bring it in. He signed a professional deal. He's there, hopefully, for Charlton fans until 2024 at least. It's really good news for the Addicts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a massive relief, to be honest. In recent years, you've had Dylan Phillips, Joe Aribo, and even Alfie Doughty leave the club for not a lot compared to probably what their true value would be if they had years left on their contract. It still might happen. Deji Elarewe still is very likely probably to leave the club at the end of the season, but given the years left on his deal, Charlton are likely to recoup a much more substantial transfer fee, which hopefully would then be reinvested in the squad. So you're not just producing these youth players and not really seeing any reward for it. So yeah, that's a huge boost. It's gone on for a while, whether Deji fancied committing his future or not. And obviously a lot of talk with his agent and some Premier League clubs sniffing. Of course, we might get to see him in action this weekend as well. But no, it's really, really huge news for Charlton and potentially for the finances of the club moving forward.
Yeah, it's certainly a good bit of news off the pitch as well for Charlton. Things are definitely looking rosier in SE7 compared to where they were a few weeks ago. Okay, that brings around up to the headlines and the results that we've had early this week. Now let's look ahead to the weekend. And there's Championship and FA Cup first round action to discuss. So we'll start with the Championship matches. Peterborough versus Fulham we'll start with. Peterborough have shown in recent weeks a little bit more fight and a little bit more hope for them staying up, haven't they, Marcus? But I think they're going to be quaking in their boots a little bit after what Fulham did to Blackburn earlier this week. How do you see this one going?
It's a tricky one because although Peterborough, they've been very up and down defensively, I'm not sure where the balance is. Does Darren Ferguson have to say to them, right, boys, we've got to go out and park the bus and try and defend our own goal, and then they'll only concede 0 or 1 goal? And if they do try and attack, is that where they get caught out? It's going to be tricky defensively. They haven't been great. Having said that, they did keep a clean sheet at home to Bournemouth and only conceded 1 at home to West Brom. But then compared to that, they conceded 6 against Sheffield United. So I'm not really sure what the kind of tactic will be. Do they fight fire with fire? Surely Fulham can't score 7 again, but yeah, it is going to be pretty scary for Peterborough, especially if they go behind early. I feel like that would be where Fulham might really get on top of them. I think Posh will probably be a little bit scared as well, since Barnsley getting that win over Derby just has them looking over their shoulders a little bit more after a good recent run. So I think, yeah, Fulham will be very confident. This looks like a matchup right now that could be between two sides that are in the Premier League and League One next season. So yeah, it's going to be a real challenge for Posh.
Okay. I'm agreeing with them, Marcus. I just can't see how Peterborough are really going to stop Fulham. I mean, you look at the quality, and so many of their attacking players are in great form at the moment as well. It's just such a hard task for Darren Ferguson and his men to try and stop them this weekend. I'm going to go for a Fulham 3-0 away win. What's your score prediction for this one?
I'm going for a bit more big on Fulham, 4-0 Fulham.
Bit of top trumps going on. But yeah, I think we can both see fairly comfortable Fulham wins. Peterborough will obviously be looking to prove us wrong. Talking QPR next, they're heading to Blackpool. Marcus, Blackpool were on a 3-game winning streak before Stoke beat them early this week, so they'll be looking to respond at Bloomfield Road. How do QPR go about getting a result this weekend?
It'll be a tough one. I think they'll take a lot of confidence from the win at Cardiff. Their away form this season, particularly before the win in the Welsh capital, has not been anywhere near as strong as their form in West London. So it's a tricky one. Obviously, Blackpool on great form. They were well beaten, I think it must be said, by Stoke City, just the 1-0 scoreline, but the Potters were easily the better team in that match. There's a great feeling around Blackpool at the moment compared to the other two sides that they came up from League One with. They're miles a better side and probably don't even have any relegation fears. I'm already saying that about a newly promoted team, which speaks to what an incredible job Neil Critchley is doing. It should be a great atmosphere. So I am sitting on the fence a little bit with this one. I see positives for both sides. I think QPR probably have more difference makers in the likes of Johansson, Ilias Chair, but there's just a great feeling around Blackpool at the moment. I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think Blackpool can stop the losing streak at just one for now.
Okay. I can see you thinking, and I wouldn't be surprised by a draw, but I do just fancy a narrow away win for QPR. I just think, as we mentioned earlier on the show, they are looking a little bit more, defensively resolute, not conceding as many goals. It seems like they might have just found a little bit extra balance between defence and attack in recent weeks. I think that might just be enough with the extra quality they do have. Not saying that Blackpool don't have quality, but QPR do seem to have a little bit more. And I do fancy them just to maybe get a narrow 2-1 win against the Tangerines. One final championship game to talk about is Millwall hosting Derby. As we mentioned, Marcus, Millwall in decent form at the moment. 3 wins out of the last 4 games. Obviously won early this week against Reading by a 1-0 scoreline. As for Derby, they lost a big game away at Barnsley earlier this week at Oakwell. It's a really important match for Derby, isn't it, to try and get something out of, but Millwall are really going to sort of fancy, punish them even further, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Derby have really struggled in front of goal this season, even through some really positive results. A lot of their wins have been 1-0, a lot of their draws have been 0-0. So it's going to be tricky to just turn it around against a side that's so defensively solid in Millwall. The Lions have also probably got a much bigger squad than Derby in terms of coping with the quick turnaround. So I don't see any other result than a Millwall win here, sadly. Obviously, Derby have upset the odds consistently this season. Maybe they can again, but just looking at the teams on paper, their recent form, Derby are the worst side going forward in terms of expected goals this season. We've now got a sample size of 16 games, which is probably enough to judge that going forward they're easily a relegation fodder. So I'm going 2-0 Millwall. I just think Afobe could be a new beast after getting that nice tap in and the winner in midweek to take into the weekend.
Yeah, I must say I fancy Millwall win as well. I might just go for a 1-0 scoreline. That seems to be in vogue at the Den at the moment. And as you say, Marcus, obviously Derby's not scoring many goals. Millwall might not score many, but they don't concede many either. So I think that might just be enough for them to get victory here. Before we go then, let's just look ahead to the FA Cup action. We'll start with Charlton. They're hosting Havant and Waterlooville. I guess the question for me, Marcus, is does Johnny Jackson rest some of his players, or does he try and keep a fairly strong side out to try and help keep that momentum going that he started to build in the league? I guess that's the balance he's got to try and work out this weekend.
Yeah, I think it'd be a bit both. He's got quite a big squad to manage for League One level, so he's got to keep a lot of players happy. I can see the likes of Albie Morgan coming in, Josh Davison, Sean Clare, maybe even Deji Elarewe, particularly after the news today about the contract. I don't think that should affect the quality of the side too much, particularly not trying to underestimate them, but when you're playing Tier 6 National League South opposition, playing not the kids, not the under-23s at all, but maybe a 1.5 string or a full second string should probably be enough, particularly with the competition for places. It's an opportunity to impress Jackson and say that you do want to be more involved as Charlton are clearly looking up the League One table. Havant and Waterloo have got some all right pros. Oscar Goburn is a centre mid for them. He had a trial at Charlton quite a few years back, so maybe he'll be looking to make amends. It's a great day out for Havant. Quite a long trip up to London, quite near Portsmouth, I think it is. But FA Cup first round, you never know if they perform anything like they did at Anfield in 2008. Then Charlton might have to be a little bit concerned going 1-0 and 2-1 up against Liverpool then. So they can't underestimate them. But of course, I'm sure Jackson won't with his team selection and of course the mindset of the players who are selected.
Yeah, I mean, having Waterloo will obviously be looking to channel that spirit of that Anfield game. But I personally do think, Johnny Jackson will look at it and he may look to rotate a little bit, but he'll see it as an opportunity to keep that momentum going that he's building. So I think Charlton might run out relatively comfortable winners. I'll go for a 3-0 victory. How do you call this one, Marcus?
Yeah, I've gone 4-0. I think maybe the fitness pays into it a little bit more. Maybe Havant can get a foothold and then Charlton maybe score 3 goals in the last 20 minutes, make it look a bit more comfortable. But they'll definitely want to keep that building that momentum despite the opposition.
Yeah, trump me again with a 4-0 over the 3-0. Very nice work. Wimbledon are in action as well. In the FA Cup, they're hosting Yorkshire side Guiseley. Marcus, what do you make of this one? This is an opportunity for Wimbledon to try and potentially go on a little cup run. It's a tie they'll at least fancy, isn't it? Particularly at home.
Yeah, they got to play Arsenal in the League Cup this season. Had a dramatic win over West Ham a few years ago as well. So clubs like in League One, League Two can gain a lot of financial rewards for having cup runs. So I don't see why they wouldn't take this match seriously at all. They've got quite a big squad as well at Mark Robinson's disposal. So the fact that they, the busy calendar that we've had in the last month or so shouldn't affect them too much. And they should be able to rotate and have some hungry players to come in and put their best foot forward against Guiseley side that are Tier 6 as well, National League North. So I see no problems. 5-0 Wimbledon for me.
Blimey, 5-0. Okay. No, I do fancy Wimbledon win as well. I won't go as heavy as that. I'm definitely not going to trump you with 6. Marcus, I think we'll go for another 3-0 win for the Dons. Let's talk Leyton Orient's game. They play host to Ebbsfleet this weekend. Ebbsfleet going well, in fairness, in the National League South. 4 games unbeaten, currently sitting 5th in the 6th tier of English football. As for Orient, got back to winning ways at the weekend. They're sitting 6th in League Two. It should be quite a good game, this, shouldn't it, Marcus?
Absolutely, yeah. I think Ebbsfleet United probably the strongest non-league outfit that we're talking about in this show. I think Orient will have to have their wits about them, or this could be one of those giant killings that we see every year. Ebbsfleet have got plenty of experience in their side. They've got Joe Martin, former Millwall, Northampton player, Chris Solly, of course, Charlton, Lee Martin, with a well-established Football League career, and Dominic Polion, who's still only 28, which blew my mind a little bit, played for Bradford, Wimbledon and Crawley in the last few years. Those 4 alone have got over 1,200 Football League appearances between them. So it's not a regular non-league outfit you'll see turning up at Leyton Orient this weekend. I think they'll give it a right good go, but I don't think Kenny Jackett will let his players get too big for their boots at all. They'll want to build on that 5-0 win over Hartlepool last weekend. So I'm going 3-1 Leyton Orient, a little bit more competitive this one. I do feel good about Ebbsfleet. I think they could make this one interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be close too. I mean, this is one of those ties where I wouldn't be surprised by a non-league side win. I wouldn't be so surprised if Ebbsfleet did get a result here. But, Orient got back to winning ways, as you mentioned, the weekend against Hartlepool. And I think it's important that they try and, keep that momentum going. And as well, with the sort of League Two sides, it's the fixtures. It's a good opportunity. They didn't play in midweek, so it's a good opportunity to almost treat it as a league game and keep momentum going. So I do think Orient might just do that and progress to the next round. I'm going to go for 3-2 victory for the O's. And finally, Sutton United, they're heading to Hayes and Yedding. Hayes and Yedding in good form themselves. They're second in the Southern South in the Isthmian. Haven't lost yet in the league. Marcus, will be a challenge for Sutton United, but obviously they're going very well in League Two as well. Do you think they're going to give them Hayes and Yedding a rare taste of defeat this weekend?
Yeah, I do. I think Sutton have been playing teams like this regularly in recent years. I know they've been competing in the FA Trophy when they're in non-league, would have had to play sides of the level that Hayes and Yedding are in at the moment. Also, Sutton have plenty of reasons to try and sort of get some financial rewards with a little cup run. They actually made a loss getting promoted from the National League to League Two because they had to rip up their 3G pitch and put in a state-of-the-art one. So it's definitely a big opportunity for Sutton to get that prize money to get into round two. And I don't think they should have any problems against a tier 7 side in Hayes and Yedding. I'm going for 4-1.
Okay, I'm going to go with Sutton victory as well. I think as well, you just look at their league form. Obviously, overall, they've had a really good season so far, but 3 losses in the last 4. They will want to try and get that winning feeling back. So I do expect them to go to Hayes and Yedding and get a result. I'm going to go for a 2-0 scoreline for Sutton United. That brings an end to the EFL London show on Football League World TV this week. Hopefully you've enjoyed it wherever you've been watching it. Do subscribe to our channel, Football League World TV on YouTube. Marcus, thank you very much for joining me this week. And hopefully when Charlton come to play in Hampton at Waterlooville, there won't be any banana skins this weekend in the FA Cup. From us here, though, it's bye for now.